She was just 3 years old, asleep in a foreign land, when she disappeared into the night. No witness, no scream, no trace. Her name became a symbol of every parent's worst nightmare. Madeleine McCann. From a seaside resort in Portugal to the world's front pages, her disappearance would expose failures, secrets, and obsessions that still echo nearly 2 decades later. Was it a kidnapping, a cover-up, or something even more chilling? This is not just a mystery. It's a mirror reflecting how far we'll go to find truth in the darkness. This is Madeleine's story. April 28, 2007. The McCann family arrived in Praia da Luz, a quiet coastal village in southern Portugal. To the McCanns, Kate, a general practitioner, and Jerry, a cardiologist, it was supposed to be a week of rest, sun, and simplicity. They had travelled with 7 close friends, another British group of doctors and professionals, all with young children, known later as the Tapas 7. The plan was relaxed and familiar. Mornings at the beach, afternoons at the pool, evenings dining just steps from their apartments. They stayed at the Ocean Club Resort, a series of whitewashed holiday flats overlooking palm trees and tennis courts. For the first few days, everything seemed idyllic. Photos from that week show Madeleine, blonde, bright-eyed, wearing pink, laughing beside her younger twin siblings, Sean and Amélie. It was a picture of family bliss, frozen in time. Each night, the adults followed a routine. They would put their children to bed around 7:30 p.m., then meet for dinner at the nearby tapas restaurant, located roughly 50 meters from their rooms. They kept the doors unlocked, checking on the kids every 20 to 30 minutes in rotation. It was their version of safe, close enough to feel secure, far enough to feel free. But safety is an illusion, one that would shatter within days. Thursday, May 3rd, 2007, began like any other. Madeleine had spent the morning playing at the resort's kids' club, then swam in the pool with her father. Later that day, she asked her mother a question that now chills the world. "Why didn't you come when we were crying last night?" Kate brushed it off. Perhaps a nightmare, she thought. But the question would later haunt her, because it might have been a warning. That evening, the McCanns followed their usual routine: dinner, laughter, and a warm Algarve breeze under the stars. Kate checked on the children at 10 p.m. and found Madeleine's bed empty. The window was open, the shutters lifted. A child's soft toy lay on the pillow, but the little girl was gone. Within minutes, chaos spread through the resort. Guests ran through hallways shouting her name. Resort staff, police, and neighbors scoured the dark streets and cliffs with flashlights. But no sound, no sign, no clue, only silence and the faint smell of salt from the sea. The perfect family holiday had just become the most famous disappearance of the 21st century. When Kate McCann opened the bedroom door that night, she entered the kind of silence only fear understands. The window was open wide, the curtains fluttering in the wind. Madeleine's small pink blanket was still warm, but her daughter was gone. At 10:15 p.m., she ran screaming through the resort. "Madeleine's gone! Someone's taken her!" Guests poured out of their rooms. The alarm spread from apartment to apartment, down the cobbled streets of Praia da Luz, until the whole village was awake. But what should have been a controlled emergency became chaos. There was no perimeter, no police, until after 11 p.m. Dozens of tourists entered the apartment, leaving behind footprints, fingerprints, and contamination that would haunt the case forever. The first officers from the GNR, Guarda Nacional Republicana, arrived around 11:10 p.m. They assumed Madeleine had wandered off, a common mistake in missing child cases. Search dogs combed the beach, cliffs, and nearby roads, but there was no trace. By sunrise, hundreds of people, neighbors, volunteers, resort workers, were searching. Every door in Praia da Luz was knocked on. Every bush, dune, and drain was checked. Still nothing. Meanwhile, investigators from the Polícia Judiciária, PJ, Portugal's equivalent of the FBI, arrived from Faro. But by the time they took control, the crime scene was already destroyed. The McCann's apartment, once the key to the truth, had become a revolving door of panic and sympathy. One of the earliest clues came from witnesses at the resort. A man named Jane Tanner, one of the Tapas 7, reported seeing a figure carrying a small child wrapped in a blanket at approximately 9:15 p.m., just minutes before Madeleine was discovered missing. The man was walking away from the Ocean Club, heading toward the night. Her description was vague. Brown hair, beige trousers, carrying the child awkwardly, but it would shape the next decade of investigation. As dawn broke over the Algarve, the McCanns sat in disbelief. The Portuguese police began to suspect a kidnapping, but with no ransom, no witnesses, and no vehicle sighted, the trail went cold within hours. The border with Spain, just 90 minutes away, wasn't even closed that night, a devastating failure. Reporters descended on Praia da Luz by the hundreds. Satellite trucks crowded the streets. Madeleine's face, 3 years old, smiling with her bright green eyes, was broadcast across the world by morning. In the first 24 hours, every crucial mistake had already been made. A contaminated crime scene, lost forensic evidence, witness timelines blurred by chaos and fear. And yet, amid the confusion, one truth became clear. This was no ordinary disappearance. Something, or someone, had moved with precision that night. The investigation was only beginning, but its foundation was already cracked. By sunrise on May 4, 2007, the quiet seaside town of Praia da Luz no longer belonged to Portugal. It belonged to the world. Television trucks lined the narrow streets. Reporters shouted into cameras from balconies. Within 24 hours, Madeleine McCann's face was everywhere. Newspapers, online banners, television specials. The photo of the little girl in her pink sun hat became a symbol of innocence stolen and a magnet for global obsession. At first, the media was an ally. The McCanns cooperated with interviews, believing that visibility would bring Madeleine home. They gave statements, held press conferences, and smiled through unbearable grief. The British tabloids, The Sun, Daily Mail, Mirror, ran daily headlines. Maddie taken from her bed. Bring her home. Donations poured in. Celebrities like J.K. Rowling, David Beckham, and the Pope himself publicly supported the search. The McCanns met with the Vatican, holding Madeleine's photo before the cameras in St. Peter's Square, a desperate plea to the world. But what began as sympathy soon twisted into spectacle. The same media that had lifted them up began to turn against them. Reporters questioned the parents' behavior. Why were they so calm? Why did Kate keep a prayer journal? Why did they dine while the children slept? The line between reporting and entertainment blurred overnight. TV hosts speculated live on air about their marriage, their faith, even their guilt. And in the digital age's infancy, the internet exploded. Forums filled with amateur detectives, conspiracy theories, and cruel accusations. One moment defined the turning point. Portuguese TV leaked images of police dogs inside the McCann's apartment, sniffing for blood and human scent. The footage spread like wildfire. Within days, tabloids across Europe began running the headline that would ruin reputations: blood found in the McCann's rental car. The McCanns, once symbols of tragedy, had become suspects in the court of public opinion. And the press didn't just report the story, it fed on it. Forensic experts argued on talk shows. Psychics offered visions. Even the British government intervened, with diplomats pressuring Portugal to treat the family carefully. The case had evolved from a local investigation into a geopolitical storm, pitting two nations' police systems against each other. Behind the cameras, Kate and Jerry McCann tried to remain composed. They kept repeating the same words: "Our only focus is to find Madeleine." But every headline, every whisper, every theory pushed that focus further away. Because while the world argued about how she disappeared, the truth, whatever it was, slipped further into the dark. And for the first time, the story of a missing child became a global narrative, twisting innocence, grief, and suspicion into one unrelenting question: who took Madeleine McCann? Every investigation has its flaws. But few in history have collapsed under the weight of two nations, two police forces, and two completely different versions of truth. By the summer of 2007, the search for Madeleine McCann had become a diplomatic nightmare. The Polícia Judiciária, PJ, Portugal's elite criminal investigation unit, believed they were handling a straightforward abduction until pressure from London began to reshape their every move. The British press demanded answers. The British government wanted progress. And soon, the Portuguese detectives found themselves not just chasing a kidnapper, but defending their own credibility. The first cracks appeared early. The PJ's lead investigator, Gonçalo Amaral, was a seasoned detective with a reputation for stubbornness and suspicion. He distrusted the British media circus surrounding the McCanns, and quietly began developing his own theory, that Madeleine had died accidentally inside the apartment, and the parents had covered it up. Meanwhile, British investigators working with Leicestershire police followed a different path entirely, focusing on reports of a stranger seen near the resort that night. They viewed the case as a likely child abduction, possibly connected to trafficking networks operating along Portugal's southern coast. The two sides clashed constantly. The Portuguese resented what they saw as British arrogance. The British accused them of incompetence. Files went missing. Witness statements were lost in translation. Even timelines differed between the two teams. One moment defined the fracture. In August 2007, sniffer dogs brought from England, trained to detect blood and human remains, alerted inside the McCann's rental car, which they had hired weeks after the disappearance. The dogs also reacted in the family's apartment, near the wardrobe and behind the sofa. Portuguese authorities took it as confirmation of Amaral's suspicions. To the McCanns, it was unthinkable. Suddenly, the grieving parents became arguidos, formal suspects under Portuguese law. The news hit like an earthquake. The media turned vicious. Headlines screamed, "Did they do it?" Maddie's parents under investigation. The McCanns were interrogated for hours, then allowed to return to England, effectively exiled by the case that had consumed them. Public opinion split sharply. In Portugal, many believed Amaral's version. In Britain, most saw the McCanns as victims of a corrupt and prideful system. By 2008, the case had completely collapsed. No body, no suspect, no proof. Only two nations accusing each other of failure. The Portuguese closed the case in July 2008, unsolved due to lack of evidence. But the story was far from over. Madeleine's disappearance had become more than a tragedy. It was now a battleground between justice, politics, and power. And every new clue would be judged not by science, but by loyalty. When Kate and Gerry McCann boarded the plane back to England in September 2007, they were no longer seen as grieving parents. They were fugitives of public opinion. The same cameras that had once captured their desperate pleas for help now followed them like predators. Journalists crowded the tarmac, shouting questions as they stepped off the plane. "Did you kill your daughter? Where's Madeleine?" The McCanns didn't answer. They just held hands, their faces pale, hollow, exhausted, as they disappeared into the fog of Heathrow Airport. Back home in Leicestershire, the couple tried to rebuild some semblance of normal life for their twins, Sean and Amelie. But there was no normal anymore. Outside their home, satellite vans parked day and night. Neighbours whispered. Even friends began to distance themselves, afraid of being pulled into the storm. The media pressure became relentless. Portuguese tabloids printed wild accusations, claiming police had found sedatives in the McCann's apartment, or that Kate's diary revealed guilt. British papers reprinted the same lies, feeding the public's hunger for a villain. Every glance, every smile, every word from the McCanns was dissected as evidence. But behind closed doors, they were falling apart. Kate stopped sleeping. She spent nights rereading police transcripts and prayer books, trying to find a reason or a sign. Gerry buried himself in strategy and advocacy, launching the Find Madeleine campaign, raising millions to fund private investigations. The couple became both investigators and the investigated, living symbols of hope and suspicion all at once. In 2008, the Portuguese case was officially closed, citing insufficient evidence. The McCanns were cleared as arguidos, but their reputations remained stained. For Kate, it felt like a second punishment. "They took our daughter," she said, "and then they tried to take everything else." Yet, even in the chaos, the couple refused to stop searching. They hired private detectives, chased leads from Morocco to Spain, and followed dozens of reported sightings. Each one ended the same way: disappointment and silence. Still, the world remained obsessed. Every time a blonde child appeared in the news, from Australia to Eastern Europe, someone somewhere asked, could it be Madeleine? Meanwhile, former Portuguese lead investigator Gonçalo Amaral published a book titled The Truth of the Lie. In it, he accused the McCanns of covering up their daughter's accidental death. The book sold millions and reignited the fire. The McCanns sued him for defamation, but the damage was irreversible. By then, the case was no longer about Madeleine. It was about the battle for narrative, truth versus reputation, grief versus blame. And amid the noise, the smallest voice, that of the missing girl, was getting harder to hear. By 2009, the official investigation was over. But for Kate and Jerry McCann, the search for their daughter had only just begun. They refused to let Madeleine become a cold case. With donations pouring into the Find Madeleine Fund, they assembled a team of private investigators, ex-police officers, and forensic consultants, determined to uncover what the authorities had missed. Their new mission wasn't just about finding their daughter, it was about reclaiming the truth. The first major hire was Método 3, a Spanish detective agency known for high-profile missing person cases. They promised results within months, claiming they were close to finding Madeleine alive. They followed alleged sightings in Morocco, Spain, and even Mauritania, where witnesses described a little blonde girl traveling with a foreign couple. Each lead began with hope. Each one ended in heartbreak. No photographs, no proof, no Madeleine. As the months turned into years, the McCanns cycled through multiple agencies. Some were credible, others were not. One investigator, Kevin Halligan, presented himself as a former intelligence operative with global reach. In truth, he was a con man. He pocketed hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations before being arrested for fraud. Another psychic claimed to see Madeleine's body buried under rocks in Praia da Luz. Police dug. Nothing. The tragedy wasn't just in the false hope. It was in the realization that the world had turned their daughter's disappearance into a market. Every opportunist, every self-proclaimed expert, every online detective saw a chance for fame or fortune. And yet, there were moments, faint glimmers of possibility, that reignited belief. In 2011, the British Metropolitan Police launched a new operation, Operation Grange. It was a full-scale review of the case, ordered by then Prime Minister David Cameron. Detectives analysed thousands of documents, re-interviewed witnesses, and reconstructed the timeline minute by minute. It was, at last, a return to order, a scientific, disciplined approach to the chaos. Their findings were startling. Several original leads had been ignored by the Portuguese police. Key witnesses had never been properly questioned, and phone records revealed that multiple individuals, some with criminal histories, had been in the area on the night of May 3, 2007. Among those persons of interest was a German national with a record of sexual assaults and burglaries in the Algarve region. His name was Christian Bruckner. He had lived in Portugal in 2007 in a van near Praia da Luz. And for the first time in over a decade, investigators whispered the word suspect again. But as the years passed and the faces of the investigators changed, one truth remained. Every search began with hope and ended with silence. Madeleine's trail had gone cold, but not forgotten. For over a decade, the story of Madeleine McCann had drifted between hope and myth until 2020, when a name surfaced that reignited the entire case: Christian Bruckner, a German national, a convicted sex offender, and a man who had once lived just minutes away from the Ocean Club in a rundown camper van on the edge of Praia da Luz. The lead came from German police, who had reopened files on unsolved crimes involving missing children. Bruckner's record was long and violent: assaults, theft, rape. He had lived off-grid in Portugal between 1995 and 2007, moving between small coastal towns, working odd jobs and breaking into tourist villas. In May 2007, the very month Madeleine vanished, he abruptly left Portugal and returned to Germany. The timing was impossible to ignore. When investigators searched his properties, they discovered a chilling collection of evidence. Computer drives filled with thousands of images of child abuse, stolen passports, and multiple phones linked to crimes across Europe. But what drew the attention of the British and German authorities was a single phone call. On the night of May 3, 2007, Bruckner's phone had connected to a cell tower less than 1 kilometer from the McCann's apartment. A local woman reported seeing a man in a van watching families near the resort days before the disappearance. And his vehicle, a cream-colored Volkswagen campervan, matched multiple witness descriptions. In 2020, German prosecutor Hans Christian Wolters made a shocking announcement on live television. "We believe Madeleine McCann is dead, and we are investigating Christian Bruckner on suspicion of murder." For the first time in years, the case had a name. But it was also a new kind of agony for the McCanns. There was no body, no proof, just a new ghost to chase. The investigation stretched across borders once again: Germany, Portugal, the UK, each with different laws, different motives, and different media agendas. Bruckner denied everything. From his prison cell, where he was serving time for another crime, he sent handwritten letters to journalists declaring his innocence and accusing prosecutors of scapegoating him. "They have no evidence," he wrote. "They just want to close the case." Yet his criminal history painted a portrait of darkness too hard to ignore. Neighbors from Praia da Luz remembered his temper, his thefts, his violence. He was known to roam the beach at night, often drunk, always watching. German authorities claimed they had concrete evidence that Madeleine was dead, but refused to disclose it publicly. The British police, meanwhile, kept Operation Grange open, officially labeling it a missing person case. It was the same old paradox: 2 nations, 1 child, and no truth. Every time justice seemed close, the evidence faded into fog, and through that fog, the face of Madeleine McCann still stared back, the girl who refused to be forgotten. By 2021, the Madeleine McCann case had become something more than a mystery. It was a mirror reflecting the flaws, obsessions, and contradictions of an entire generation of investigators, journalists, and ordinary people. 13 years had passed. The leads had grown colder, the suspects older, and the memories fainter. But one thing had not changed: the public's need for answers. Forensic analysis of Christian Bruckner's van yielded hair fibers, but none that could be conclusively linked to Madeleine. Soil samples, DNA traces, and digital evidence all failed to provide the undeniable proof that prosecutors needed. Every piece of potential evidence led to another dead end. Meanwhile, German authorities insisted they held critical evidence, something they described as not circumstantial. Rumors swirled. Some claimed they had discovered photos. Others whispered about recordings, or even a confession shared with a former associate. But the prosecutors said nothing more. Their silence became another riddle inside the case. In the UK, Operation Grange investigators remained cautious. The British press demanded action, but detectives were trapped between political pressure and scientific limits. They couldn't declare Madeleine dead without proof. They couldn't arrest Bruckner without evidence. And so they waited, watching, listening, digging through mountains of data, hoping for one mistake. The McCann's home in Rothley, England, had become both a shrine and a prison. The walls were lined with drawings of Madeleine, the same face, frozen at age 3, forever unchanged. Kate and Jerry still appeared in interviews, their composure hardened by time. They no longer spoke in tears, but in calm defiance. "Someone knows what happened," Kate would say, and one day they will tell us. Our public opinion, however, was divided. Online, millions of people had turned the case into a digital battlefield. Some believed the McCanns were victims of a tragic crime. Others, fueled by conspiracy theories, accused them of involvement, misdirection, or cover-up. The internet had no mercy and no filter. Through the chaos, one haunting question remained. Where was the truth? Was Madeleine alive somewhere, lost but breathing? Had she fallen victim to a crime so perfect it erased itself? Each theory offered a different ending. That she was abducted by a trafficking ring, that she was accidentally killed and the crime covered up, that she wandered off and was never found, or that Bruckner, the drifter in the van, took her that night and buried the secret forever. But truth in this case was not a matter of evidence alone. It was about faith. Faith that after all the lies, noise and silence, something real might still emerge. As the sun set over Praia da Luz, locals still whispered her name. The apartment where she vanished remained rented to tourists who claimed to feel a strange chill near the window. And somewhere, in the endless echo of unanswered questions, the small voice of a child still called for home. Madeleine McCann's disappearance didn't just mark a family's tragedy, it reshaped how the world understood missing persons, fear, and media power. Before 2007, missing child cases rarely captured the planet's attention. After Madeleine, everything changed. Her name became a symbol, not just of loss, but of global awareness. From Lisbon to London, from New York to Sydney, millions knew her face. The small child with bright eyes, a faint freckle on her left iris, and a smile forever trapped in time. Governments took notice. The European Union accelerated programs for cross-border police cooperation. Interpol created stronger data-sharing protocols for missing minors. And in Britain, Operation Grange became one of the most expensive investigations in UK history, costing taxpayers over $13 million. It was no longer just a case, it was an institution. But legacy can be complicated. The media, which once carried her image with compassion, began to turn on itself. Paparazzi chased the McCanns through airports. Newspapers sold stories that blurred the line between fact and fiction. And online, a darker ecosystem emerged, forums dedicated not to finding Madeleine, but to dissecting her parents' every move. For many families of the missing, the McCann case became both a blessing and a curse. It drew attention, yes, but also unrealistic expectations. Not every missing child would receive millions in funding, political support, or international coverage. Madeleine's case had become the benchmark, and for some, the burden. Law enforcement also evolved. The lessons from Portugal and the UK changed how authorities approached disappearances abroad. Resorts, rental apartments, and holiday zones across Europe implemented stricter protocols for child safety and emergency reporting. Even airlines began tracking family seat assignments more closely. But perhaps the greatest legacy was emotional. For parents worldwide, the story of Madeleine McCann redefined the limits of fear. It reminded them how fragile safety truly is, that even the most ordinary family, in the most idyllic place, could face the unimaginable. And through it all, Kate and Jerry McCann remained the unbreakable center of a storm that never ended. They built foundations, launched awareness campaigns, and pushed for new global alert systems. Each public appearance was a battle between grief and hope, between privacy and duty. "Our fight isn't just for Madeleine," Kate said in one interview. "It's for every child who disappears into silence." Years later, their words still echoed in courtrooms, conferences, and policy meetings. Madeleine's case became part of law, of television, of memory, woven into the cultural DNA of a generation that learned to fear what can happen in a single night. Yet for all the progress, one truth remains. Laws can change, systems can evolve, but the void of a missing child can never be filled. And so, every May 3rd, candles still burn in Rothley and in Praia da Luz, not for closure, but for remembrance. Because Madeleine McCann's story didn't end with her disappearance. It became eternal. 17 years later, one truth remains unbroken. No one knows what happened to Madeleine McCann. Every file, every photograph, every lead is a fragment of a puzzle that refuses to fit. On May 3rd, 2007, something happened between 9 and 10 p.m. in apartment 5A of the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz. That single hour has been reconstructed, debated, and reimagined more than any other in modern criminal history. We know this much. Kate and Jerry McCann left the apartment to dine with friends at the nearby tapas restaurant, just 50 meters away. They checked on the children at intervals. At 9:05, the room was quiet. At 10 Madeleine was gone. The window was open, the shutters lifted, a child's toy lay on the bed. But what happened in between? Did an intruder break in and take her while the parents were at dinner? Did Madeleine wake, wander off, and vanish into the night? Or was it something darker, a cover-up, a conspiracy, a moment of panic that spiraled out of control? Portuguese police believed the parents knew more than they said. British detectives insisted there was no evidence to support that. The truth sits somewhere in the space between those two investigations, a space filled with politics, pride, and silence. Then there's the man spotted by witnesses near the apartment that night, carrying a child, barefoot, wrapped in a pink blanket. For years, he was the center of every theory. But in 2013, Scotland Yard identified him as a tourist, picking up his own daughter from the resort creche. A simple misunderstanding or a missed opportunity? Each revelation seemed to solve one mystery, only to open another. Every certainty turned back into doubt. Even now, police across 3 countries admit that not one piece of physical evidence proves what became of Madeleine. The theories persist, that she was taken by a local burglar, surprised by her awakening, that she was kidnapped by an organized child trafficking ring, that she died accidentally and someone hid the truth. None have been proven, and yet every year new witnesses come forward. New images surface, new experts claim to have found the final clue, but Madeleine remains where she's been since that night, between memory and myth. Her story endures not because of what we know, but because of what we don't. It's a haunting reflection of our collective need for closure, our obsession with mystery, and our inability to accept the possibility that some truths may never be found. In the end, the light from apartment 5A still glows in the minds of millions, a silent reminder that sometimes the scariest part of a mystery is not the crime itself, but the endless question, what really happened that night? If you've followed Madeleine's story until the end, you understand why the world still searches. Her disappearance isn't just a case, it's a wound that never healed. Join our channel as we continue to uncover the untold stories behind the world's most haunting mysteries. Your support helps us bring justice, truth, and remembrance to those who can no longer speak. Subscribe, share, and keep the light alive for every missing child, because every story deserves to be told.